You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Alexander Leonida, and I'm your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi, Alexander, and welcome to The Only Constant. I'm really excited to have you on the show today. I'm looking forward to a really good conversation.
Thanks, Lassie. I've already heard or listened to a number of the podcast episodes and excited to join you.
Cool. I'm sure this will be a memorable episode because I always like chatting with you. We've been discussing for years about different aspects of the automation market and also on your software you're developing, SilkFlo. So we've been really going through the lengths of it, and I've always enjoyed our conversations, and that's also why I thought it was a good idea to reach out to you and ask you to be on the Only Constant.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So on that note, Alexander, you are the CEO of SilkFlo, um, which I envision is about making stuff flow like silk or become smooth like silk.
That was the original. That was the original inspiration, right? Just there's a lot of people trying to implement these new technologies, and how can we make it flow like silk? Exactly.
So, obvious question: how do you make generative AI flow like silk?
Ah, it's still new, and there's a lot of companies still trying to figure out the same question.
Hmm.
Um, I can't give you a full-on answer to that. However, I would go back to other lessons we've learned from previous technologies. So implementing low-code technologies like RPA or API-based automation, or even Python-based automation. Um, reuse the same governance structures, the same best practices, and they can lay a really nice foundation for implementing generative AI. Understand the pain points of your business, look at the data you have, and if it's unstructured, maybe that could be a good opportunity for Gen AI. Um, understand the kind of cost benefits analysis of the whole process, or any solution you're looking to bring on board. Not enough companies do that. They jump on the FOMO wagon and they just start. You mentioned it once, I believe, in one of our talks. You mentioned how they implement it, but they don't actually go ahead and
Yeah, they install it but don't implement it, right?
yeah, that's it. The other way around. Yeah, so they install it, but they don't
Hmm.
implement it. And implementation is a whole other board game.
So you're saying that it's
You
the
know, just
same?
having that
You're saying
workflow.
it's sort of the same thing as we did before, or seeing something different here?
I would say the best way I've seen companies implement it is to follow a structured approach, not FOMOing into it. And that structured approach can be borrowed from previous examples, right? Previous
Hmm.
technology implementations. So starting off with discovering what opportunities across the business you could use Gen AI for. And you may even go, in one of our conversations previously, actually, off record, you did actually mention, look at previous RPA use cases, for example, or low code automation use cases, and see if there's any unstructured data which you could add or enhance using AI technology. So that's also a really good point you made. Um, yeah, go back through the use cases, use the same kind of governance structures, the same flow, understand and assess and prioritize each of the use cases against your strategic goals as a company and organization. Um, make sure you've got some way to track how you're going from idea all the way to finished AI solution or Gen AI implementation. And then obviously try and measure the benefits afterwards. Not enough companies are doing that. It's becoming more of a topic. Try to understand, are you getting the estimation? Are you getting the benefits that you estimated
Hmm.
for yourself internally as a company, but also your clients or customers?
So what? Just the FOMO thing. You said don't do it out of FOMO. What's the risk of doing it with FOMO?
Do I have to
Yeah.
explain? Um, okay, so for example, I was speaking to a large consultancy last, and they mentioned in 2023 they had many proof of concepts for Gen AI, and the majority of them didn't go past the POC stage
Mm,
because they FOMO'd into it, didn't look into the best practices, or didn't even, but they were trying to um, install it but not implement
mm,
it.
yeah,
So yeah, it's just like anything with FOMO. People FOMO'd into RPA without choosing the right processes to apply it to.
yeah.
The same thing with Gen AI or AI in general, whether it's NLP, OCR, whatever you want to
And that's
call
what
it.
you're trying to remedy, right, in SilkFlo, isn't it? That trying to find a way to make people stop and think a little bit before, maybe focus on the problem, maybe focus on the value. Isn't that the point?
Yeah, focus on the strategic aspect, right? It's like a layer on top of all these technologies. So in all my years implementing all of these technologies, building them, launching them, so on and so forth, the same problems arose again and again, whether that's to do with poor governance, whether that's to do with lack of visibility, and then also poor design practices.
Mm,
So just trying to give companies a structured, governed way of doing it
mm.
instead of you know many multiple vendors. They all have their own way of doing things, and you have no control over how you're implementing AI.
So I I get we spoke at length earlier, you and me, about why you saw the opportunity for SilkFlow. I'd like you just to elaborate a little bit about the opportunity for SilkFlow, why you saw a need for that tool, and not as a marketing thing. That's not the point. It's not a pitch, but just why
Yeah.
why why do we need something that does what SilkFlow does? And then of course you can explain what it does, and then seeing, is there a change, with the generative AI emergence? Did that change some of your perspectives, some of your, everyone was caught a little bit by surprise, it seems. So that's not what I'm looking for, but how did it actually affect the way you saw the future for the tool and for the enterprise use of the tool?
Right. So I'll answer the first part. So when it comes to the reason for SilkFlow, again, it goes back to all my experience implementing all these technologies. There was no standardized way to do so, and standardize something, you can scale it up,
Yeah.
right? The idea is to get companies past those proof of concepts into real world implementation, whereby at the end of the year they're able to go to their stakeholders and say, "Hey, we actually did meet those targets for operational efficiency. We saved on adding new headcount. We reduced the number of work hours and provided more productivity benefits to this department, and this department." Um, the reason for SilkFlow came about purely because companies didn't have a structured way to do that. They're using multiple tools, whether it's project management tools, pipeline management, spreadsheets, online forms,
Spreadsheets.
you name it. It's a mix of different technologies to do to do the same thing. So SilkFlow was a way to holistically kind of govern that life cycle, whether it's process improvement, low code, or AI. Um, Remind me the second part of
Oh,
the
it's just,
question.
how do you see that? Do you see that change at all with the generative AI
All
emergence,
right,
right?
yeah. So actually, I find the change to be beneficial in the sense that more companies started to ask the question of how do we get a grip on this? How do we have more control? So with SilkFlow being that layer on top, it doesn't really matter how many different technologies come out in the next 10 years, we can still be that governing solution for it. It's just a case of changing our roadmap to adopt to that new technology. So we're adding in AI governance this year,
Mm.
right? And that kind of is a natural flow from helping companies with low
But
code
what's the
automation,
difference with that?
process
What's the
improvement, and
difference
then
then, right?
AI.
Because you're saying two things out of, right? You're saying that on one hand we
Right.
are, it doesn't really matter. It's perfect for us because we are built for emerging tech and new tech, and you want to do new stuff, right? So that's why you need us. We cover all of them. We are just the value tool and governance tool for all. One ring to rule them all. You should have called your tool that. The Ring of
Yeah,
Sauron instead of
that would be great
SilkFlow, right?
actually.
Yeah.
Got to get the Lord of the Rings reference in there,
Yeah.
right?
Always, every pod has a lot of the rings reference. That's the point. So we should really know
Yeah.
SilkFlow, aka the one ring to rule them all. But now you're saying, at the same time, you're saying that you're coming up with some new AI things in it. So it did change. What is that? What is the AI governance part of it? Why? How does it differ? That's what I'm interested in here. You get my point?
Right. So it's a natural progression, right? So first you're doing the process improvement, continuous improvement aspect. But now with upcoming regulations, you not just need to understand the impact of these technologies and measure the benefits and impact of them, but you also have to measure the impact not just internally but externally. How does the model itself tackle fairness? How does it measure in terms of privacy? How does it measure in
Mm,
terms of transparency? Can we easily explain how it's doing what it's doing and why it's doing what it's doing? If not, then you may be in trouble in the next few
mm.
years. So it's kind of like another assessment which we can easily transition to within the platform.
Oh, nice.
Um, and it kind of is like an evolution of our roadmap. It gave us another thing to focus on. And it really, again, fits into that ethos of helping companies drive the adoption of these new technologies.
So I always say that sometimes you should be like a farmer. If it smells of shit, then there's money in it, right? Um, and it seems like you're oh, something people can't govern here, and then Alexander's like, oh, I see an opportunity.
Well, yeah, but taking away the aspect of it, I mean, I could do a lot more with SilkFlo than I could as a
Mm.
consultant previously. And if I can help over 100,000 companies do all this, then I'd be more of like or it's an ego
But
boost,
how do you,
right?
okay? So, but how
It's
governance is one thing, and that's actually a really interesting perspective. I think we should also get back to that. Maybe elaborate a little bit more on that. But I think
Yeah.
it's all value. You say you also you measure the value, and this is one of the big pain points I see right now. Right, I read an article the other day that said that the public sector in Denmark should stop hiring administrative personnel because now we have AI. So we should fix everything with AI. And I couldn't help writing a comment to it saying that, but I haven't seen an enterprise scale AI to the level where it can say we are stopping having a hiring freeze in administrative personnel yet. And now you're expecting it of the entire public sector, which I think is an over exaggeration at the current level. We're talking, this is February 2024. Maybe I'll change my mind in a month. Anyway,
No, but it's a good
yeah.
point you mentioned.
So I think we don't. For me, the problem is I don't see the end game yet. So I played a lot of RPGs when I was young. I played a lot of Diablo. I
Mm.
don't know if you played Diablo. A lot of people have. But
Diablo, Witcher,
yeah,
Mass
yeah, but the
Effect,
problem
you
is,
name it,
right,
I've
if you're
probably
playing those games, right, and you're building your character, you're adding, oh, I'm gonna add 5 points to my dexterity or whatever. And you
yeah.
don't know that you don't need dexterity when you're a barbarian and you're going into the end game with your Balrons, then you're building your character the wrong way. So the problem is right now, do we even know the end game? That's my question, Alison. Do you know what value you
And
need
it's
to measure?
a fantastic question. So if we take the RPG analogy, you would gradually build up your character so it can meet the next challenge. Companies still haven't met current challenges when it comes to low code and AI adoption, right? When it comes to building up change management within their company, building up a digital first
Mm,
mindset, stakeholder management, um, citizen development kind of is still talked about, and it's come into the fore even more now because the accessibility of these AI technologies is unquestionable. Um, when you mention end game, it's difficult for me to actually talk about an end game of AI because, I mean, God, since we invented fire, did you know where that was going to go? We've had numerous technological advancements then, and if you look at the RPG analogy again, you got that tech tree usually with RPGs or skill tree, you know, but they're again limited by our imagination.
mm.
And there's an endpoint. Eventually, you get to a level 100, and that's the final thing you can unlock. No one knows where this is going to go, and no one could have said where fire was going to
No, but there's still
go.
just this this basic maturity, right? What is that? What is the basic? Let's not talk end game then. Just some mid game or something. How how will it look when you get to the next act, right? Or when you get to the next stage? Do we even know what the next stage is? That is actually one of the problems, right? Isn't it?
It is, and there's a lot of conversation about it. Depends on how far you want to go, but I read a lot of futurist books to do with
Mm.
AI. There's Noah Harari who talks about humans melding with artificial
Yeah.
intelligence and synthetic. Um,
Homo Deus.
that's an
Yeah.
interesting take. Homo Deus, yeah, and they become this new Homo
A hive
Deus, right?
mind.
Then you've got exactly like a hive mind. And funnily enough, if you go back to RPG, Mass Effect,
Mhm.
spoiler alert, if you do finish Mass Effect 3, there are three main choices for how humanity goes forward in future: destroy machines, something else, and then the third and final one, if you get the highest amount of points in the game, is the merging of both human and synthetic, so that again you have that
Mm.
hive mind. There is this futurist view that could be one of the best scenarios, because we we've evolved to the point where we are a merge of synthetic and human. But yeah, that's the future aspect. Going back to like say midterm and early term, right?
I love this,
Short
Alexander.
term.
We're going full nerd here. You know, we are
I
50
well,
minutes
yeah.
in.
I mean,
We've had Lord of the Rings, Mass Effect, and Diablo already, right? So,
well, look, I'm hoping that the readers are on the same page as us. If they're listening to the Only Constant anyway, they must be nerds, or at least going on verging on that. Um, so yeah, midterm, can we say where the end game is or where that part is? I don't know. There are so many uses still being discovered for AI, whether it's not just Gen AI, but all the other versions of AI, all the other layers, right? I think Wayne mentioned this in the previous one. There's different layers,
mm,
and AI is a big concept. We're seeing augmented reality take shape, whereas say I tried to start an augmented reality startup in 2020, 2016, and that didn't work out so
mm.
well because the technology wasn't there. Now, if I was to redo the same thing, the technology is there, and the software is there as well, and the talent is there as well. So I think the best way to tackle this would literally just be to take it step by step. Focus on where you want to be in, say, the next few years,
Mm.
and take steps to get to that level. Focusing on the next 10 or 20 years will be very difficult.
Yeah, but that's also the problem is that a lot of companies are saying, transform your business now, do something that's game changing, be aggressively expansive and stuff like that, right? Look at the whole core of your data and your processes and mix it all up. Hiring freeze in the public sector, as I just said, right? So, and
Yeah.
that is where I start saying we don't know even the mid game yet. We don't know if that it makes sense, right? Um, because what I'd say is, look at your problems right now. Just do what you
Yeah.
usually do. Treat this as now we have RPA on unstructured data, and we can talk to our data. But that's the problem. No one really knows what to talk to their data about, right? Still, it's so new. But so for me, it's more like the problem should be at the forefront. Now we have the technology to fix everything. That means the problem should have center stage, right? Uh,
Yeah, agreed. I mean, companies need to just stay grounded. At the end of the day, going back to what you mentioned, so we've had hype cycles in the past.
mm,
If you can focus on a sustainable way to do this, and again, leveraging previous governance models or methodologies and adding or enhancing them, and focusing on just value, I'm massively pragmatic.
mm-hmm.
So I'm mostly focused on the outcome, and I'm happy to change my methodology if something new comes about which could improve it, right? And that's how companies need to behave: flexible enough that their methodologies can change and adapt to new scenarios. In this case, adopting new technology. But as with any technology adoption, it roughly follows the same path. And to kid ourselves, and FOMO in basically due to someone who's probably benefiting from selling you this hype. Whether it's large consultancies, whether it's software firms saying their AI tool is the best you've ever imagined, probably just a rapper or something. Yeah, it's easy to get caught up
So you said you're
when it
just
comes.
like a hyper agile mindset all the time, isn't it?
I mean, look, agile is a tough one because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Mm.
Um, when it comes to security and regulated industries, you can't really be as agile as you want. You still have to go down the waterfall route. Um,
It's also really difficult in really big, complex organizations. Martin said that on the
yes,
podcast a couple of weeks ago.
yes. Hybrid approach, obviously, with
Yeah,
agile and waterfall, it still is fine. But then again, with when it comes to the data point you mentioned, um, how do we interact with data? Before it was obviously pen and paper. Probably in some countries it still is, right? Some businesses, there's still a heavy
yeah.
amount of digitization that needs to happen before you can leverage new technologies on top of it, right? And we're still using things like OCR and um, what was it called again?
Yeah.
IDP, so intelligent document processing, right? Which again, it falls under that branch of or machine learning. I prefer to call it. Um, some companies, I think you mentioned the public sector earlier, right? I was talking to someone in the university space. They can't adopt a technology, or at least a startup technology or tool, SaaS tool like ours, for example, unless it's been around for 5 years.
Mm,
So that is already a limitation in how fast they can go.
mm,
If you go to, say, Japan, and you're trying to do example, and you're trying to do anything to do with the like some legal process or government process or public services process, you still use fax machines and floppy disks.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I mean, there's
Yeah,
pros and cons. It's hard to hack a fax machine,
true.
but and I haven't truly gone to the cloud yet. So everyone's at a different stage of maturity.
Yeah,
Assess where you are, understand what kind of capability your company has or your employees have. Build up those, the skill tree in an RPG speak, right? Build up that skill tree. Continuously educate C-suite so that their expectations are managed, because you need to manage them. Um, they're the ones probably FOMOing in because they're at roundtables or meetings or clubs or something, and everyone's talking about how they're implementing AI. Um, but they're not telling you about the failures that they. So anyone you speak to. So focus on just understanding as a C-suite, for example, or executive, understanding your role within the organization when it comes to AI. How can you speed up the adoption? How can you not be a blocker? But also how you can find opportunities that actually make sense and are feasible for your company at your current maturity level.
yeah. Yeah, but that makes complete sense, and that's also why digital transformation. Well, I don't think people are still using the term, and I've also used it, but no one really knew what it was. It was just something like this is a mode we're in, right? We're we're transforming something, and don't miss
Yeah.
out on digital transformation. But it's a really a weird term. I hope AI will become a little bit more relevant. It doesn't seem like that. It seems like it's getting also blurry, right? But the point is, right, the digital transformation, there's something like you're transforming something to become digital, or you're transforming your digital practices. But if you're not haven't even digitized yet, which you said, which is true, a lot of things are still not digitized. Also, there are different ways of it. I always say, wave one is sort of just getting it into a digital format. But to be honest, an email is not. It's not digital. It's just text, unstructured
Unstructured in
text,
some
right?
extent, but it goes back to what you mentioned, right? So
But it doesn't matter anymore with the new AI,
but
right? So now it's
exactly.
suddenly,
And you would be using AI technically to digitize most of those paper-based processes. You'd be
mm,
using a form of it called
yeah,
OCR or intelligent document processing or something like that, right? So, um, yes, it has its use cases. It's just a case of educating yourself on what the use cases are within your particular industry, your particular department, and then going from there, really.
mm. So, but you've been a consultant in the previous hype cycle with automation, right? And that's why you built SilkFlo, basically. Just give me your
Mm.
right now your key advice to a fresh consultant who is being all blown away by the AI hype, right? What should he think about? You already mentioned some things, but just what are the key advice to a fresh consultant blown away?
Good question. I think start slow. Understand that AI is a massive bubble. Not in the sense of like a hype cycle. I mean it's like an overarching technology, and it's made up of many different parts: deep learning, NLP, CR,
Mm,
all that good stuff. Learn about each one in a generic way. Understand how the pros and cons, how it's implemented, what the best use cases are, and just go through that. A lot of the vendors have really good um, training, most of it free. So go through them, try and take as many courses as you can to the point where you can easily have a conversation about every single part of the AI spectrum. And then when it comes to actually understanding how to implement it, the way I started anyway, I started off as a business analyst back in the day. I figured, okay, what's the best way for a business analyst to add value when it comes to process
mm,
improvement or digitization or process automation? Well, I've got to understand the tech side of it. So I learned how to develop with those tools as well. At a foundational level, just enough. Then I also learned some of the old school kind of Lean Six Sigma process improvement aspects. So, whether it's yellow belt, black belt, all that kind of stuff. What makes a good process for automating? Um, where to look for? Is it error prone? What's the data structure? All that good stuff. Try and understand the feasibility of what you're trying to do and how to assess or different technologies. And then with that overarching view of the spectrum of AI, you'll see the patterns of which technologies can be used for which problem. People process technology in that order. Understand the pain points of your customer, then focus on process. What's the data telling you? What's the error rate like? What's the digitization? What's the data structure of this process? And then you go to the technology. What technology in this toolkit that we may already have as a consultancy available to us, or as an end client, or as even a an organization? What's our toolkit, and how can we apply that to what we've discovered?
So you almost got me. I almost interrupted you in the beginning because you were so focused on the tech stuff. Learn about the tech. Look at it from the vendors. Like, oh, you're starting with the tech, Alexander. I'll say to anyone, my because my advice, and you ended up being at that point, right? Would be like humility. You don't know the
Mm,
world, and your technology is not gonna make you know the world, right? You have to understand
yeah,
that there's so much in the context of what people do you don't understand, that there's so much you're impacting when you're having impact, and you need to understand what you're impacting more than you understand what you're hitting them with. It doesn't matter if you throw a rock, don't focus on the rock, focus on what it hits, right? To some extent, it's not the problem is not that the wind is blowing, but what the wind is carrying when it's blowing, right? To some extent. So it's what you're gonna get hit by, what it's hitting.
yeah.
It's like but if you get my point, right? And then you ended up doing that as well, saying focus on the problems instead. I like that, but I was almost getting Alexander,
Yeah, yeah. So I saved
yeah, you
myself.
did, you did.
Yeah, no, but I mean, obviously, how are you going to get people interested in learning or becoming, like, if you're a new consultant,
Mm,
how are you going to get them interested? You focus on the cool new technologies that are
yeah,
out there,
yeah, obviously.
and then you kind of, as at a high level, like I mentioned, then you go into, okay, but on a deeper level, you need to understand things like soft skills. How do you speak to your end user? How do you understand their pain points? And that's all to do with yes, answering open-ended questions, making sure you're empathizing with them.
Mm,
Those soft skills will be useful, especially when it's you versus a process mining tool, or or augmenting a process mining tool, for example, or a task mining tool. Just being able to understand why behind the uh, why why they're having the problems they have,
yeah,
why this process is an issue, and so on.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it will take some time. It's not like 1 month and then you can learn everything. Uh, you know,
No, but it's
I've
also,
developed, it
we
takes
we
years.
came into as a, we uh, we had it was a different world. RPA was really big when RPA was at its most hyped, right? But it's not anywhere near the AI hype. But that's also why I think advice on that is helpful, right? Telling people, how should you not think of it? You should not focus on the technology. I think it's an important message actually, because Microsoft changed their partner network to be the AI cloud partner network or something. It's called AI something now, and that's
Yeah,
just it's just everywhere.
everything's AI now.
Everything's AI, right?
All the RPA vendors are now putting AI in
Yeah.
everything, or they're focusing less on the whole robot aspect and more on Copilot. And
I feel like it's
yeah,
it's like that movie,
it's
right?
going with the trend.
Everything, everywhere, all at once, right? And
Yeah,
people are like, "What's?" You know, then we'll have sausage fingers. Sorry, that's a reference, but to the movie. But you can have
yeah.
everything you want, right? But you also said, focus on the use cases, figure out what use cases work, right? And use cases are hard, right? In generative AI, and I think also Bina mentioned a couple of episodes back that we're working with unreliable computers. Will we even know what to talk to a data set about in a couple of months or years? Do we know what to do with this unreliable computer? You can talk to your data. What do we want to talk to it about? You can work with unstructured, but it's also stochastic. How do we, you know I do you think that this autonomous thing is gonna just ta-da, and then you have it, or are we gonna you have to get used to hallucinations? A
In,
lot of questions there, I know.
yeah, there's a lot to pump back. So let me try and answer some of them in, in like an unstructured way. Even OpenAI, Sam Altman says you need hallucinations for anything to
Yeah.
work, right? If you just give it a concise, I don't know what you call it, but you don't let it differ and be creative, then you're going to just get a really boring answer.
Mm.
Um, where Gen AI shines is in variation. So if you're looking at something where you can apply it and there's variation, great. But if you're looking at applying it in a place where you need the same answer every single time, probably just better off with a template.
Yeah.
um, I mean, the data question itself is a interesting one. You and I guess that's where it ties into things like transparency. If you understand uh, how it's trained, what data it's trained on, maybe you can have a better confidence in the answers you're getting from this tool. Um, the hallucination part is to be expected. That's why I use many different tools at the moment. I still use Google search.
Yeah.
Don't 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 hate on me, but
No, but
yeah,
feeling like a boomer for using Google, right? It's
yeah, yeah, I feel old now. I'm still using. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're using AI for everything." Well, no, not necessarily, because the last time I asked it about an equation, it gave me the wrong answer. So, or the last time I asked it about some sports stats or something, it gave me the wrong answer. So, you still need to do some research. But I think where I'm getting scared is, at least my worries for the future when it comes to that data, is eventually with all these AI systems producing more content, producing
mm,
more, and if we're looking at data in the consumer aspect, um, eventually we're just going to have an echo chamber of the same pieces of information being AI generated information
mm.
overtaking human information. We'll all be paying for private data sets or private news networks or private.
Yeah, I said that a year ago, I think, in a
Yeah.
post that we're
Oh, you
gonna.
did?
I don't think you read that necessarily, but that we might end up having a closed internet. People will be closing down their
Yeah.
information flows because human generated. That other people also said this recently. Things that are generated by humans, genuinely will a thousandfold increase in value because you have so
Yep.
much generated crap out there.
So I'm keeping hold of all the books that I've collected over the years.
Yeah, yeah. All I,
They're going to be like
you know,
artifacts. They're going to
I
be
wrote I
collector's
wrote like
items.
500-600 poems when I was a late teenager, early 20s. I thought I was going to be a poet at that time. I think I'm going to just hold on to them. I actually put them in a bank box or something, because it's going to get really valuable very soon.
Yeah, yeah,
Original
exactly.
teenage heartache.
Yeah.
No, but you said that you spoke to a big IT service firm or tech firm, I don't know, but that had a lot of pilots, right? And they didn't. There are POCs with generative AI, and none of them worked. Not a lot of them worked.
Well, a low percentage. Yeah,
So that's why
and I guess it
asking
comes back
use
to that use
cases are
case.
hard, right? Yeah,
Use
exactly.
cases
That's
are
why
hard.
I'm asking you.
Yeah.
So what didn't work? Do you know anything? What didn't work for them or for someone else? Do you know what doesn't work? What have you heard? What have you seen? What doesn't work?
FOMO
What
for
works?
one. FOMO for one. Uh, Not understanding. It's hard to say because every industry is different. Every use case is
Yeah.
different. Specifically, anything to do with a kind of highly repetitive process whereby you you want to cheat with Gen AI, for example, instead of spending time building out templated answers. Let's say chatbot, for example, that hasn't worked for everyone
No.
because you can't rely on Gen AI to to build a chatbot completely. It needs to have that Gen AI aspect of natural human flowing conversation. But then again, it needs to have structured answers so that it's not going. It's less likely to be hacked, less likely to be selling a car for $1. Remember
Yeah, I
that use
remember
case?
that
That was
one definitely.
brilliant. Yeah, like it's just going to
But,
again, it's hallucinating. It's telling you what you want, what it estimates you want to hear,
mm,
right? To continue the conversation, to use up more tokens,
yeah.
and and that's kind of if you think about that as the end goal. That's why I always give you a massive explanation whenever you ask it to do something. So it's because it's just using up tokens.
Yeah. It's a
It's
consumption game.
yeah, consumption game, and that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of these things failed. The consumption and usage was a lot more than they expected, and it's because they didn't plan for it. They didn't do a proper cost benefit analysis of what are the implications of 10,000 customers asking it to recite poems instead of asking it about their insurance claim.
But this is also one of the reasons I think that we always talk about China as the big challenger in AI, but I think they have much more problem with these stochastic hallucinations than we do in the West because we're sort of, hyper liberal to some extent. We're okay with getting information that's uncontrollable, but uncontrollable information is not good when you have, a communist regime, for instance, that doesn't work that. And you have censorship, state censorship. So
You have it doesn't mean that they're not using it.
no, no,
There was a book I read recently, 3.0 AI superpowers, China, Silicon Valley, New World Order, that kind of
yeah,
thing. Something Lee, Kai-Fu Lee.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Typhoon could
he
be yes,
mentioned how, yeah, he mentioned like the different waves of AI, like autonomous, internet, business, and so on, and how China and the US are leading, but in different areas. Um, and again, there's the hard thing to say is that because China don't have the government at least don't have as many restrictions as the West, I'm sure they're going to, in certain areas of AI, like massively exceed anything the West can do because of our regulations, because of our privacy concerns, because of our um, yeah limits. It's I'd say for warfare, for espionage, for surveillance,
yeah. Oh,
they're going to have a massive
I'm starting to think also, we have all these ideas,
lead.
yeah, some AI things, right? The generative AI, I don't know, people always like we can envision how this could go if it just kept on improving on unhinged, right? But the there's some voices out there, Jeffrey Funk in the fourth episode. He doesn't believe that technology will keep on improving at this rate. He sees that most technologies they came out and then they plateaued immediately, and then nothing happened. Um, and he sees also that the Moore's law is pausing, right? So if Moore's law is pausing, then we won't have those improvements to generative AI as we hope we will, and then we won't end up having something that can control the world that like that. Then we have what we have right now, basically. What if I'm just starting to think? What if GPT-4 Gemini is the biggest models we're ever going to have that has some kind of reasonably well structured, not polluted by generated crap data set AI model? What's that? What if it's the best model we're ever going to have? You know,
Interesting.
that's a
I
that
mean, there's
people don't think that way, but maybe we should just consider that possibility.
not necessarily. There are popular, I think Star Wars, they had AI at one point and then they completely got rid of it. And then they just had, if you look into the histories, I believe, and again, it's either Star Wars or some other one. Or is it Star Trek? I can't remember. But they had some kind of AI, super intelligence, but then they had to get rid of it because it was too dangerous. And so they just have a limited version
Mm.
of machine learning or artificial intelligence, for example, not super, but like the weaker version of.
Yeah, but in Star Wars they have a crappy
Um,
chatbot. It's called C3PO, and then they have a bot that can actually do things. That's R2D2,
Yeah,
right? But it
but it's
can't
good at
talk.
one thing. So C-3PO can do a lot of stuff, including like movement and stuff. But he knows like God knows how many languages. But that's his main purpose.
Yeah,
R2D2 was like a general service bot, and that could pretty much yeah. He was creative, but he to some extent. But he also he was able to do a lot of things.
we
Then
can't
he had
he
limitations as
can't
well,
speak.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he can't speak. So it's limited in some way. If GPT-4, which I don't believe it is the final version of what we've got, then we just got to get better at prompting, I guess.
No, but I'm trying to also. I was trying to get at also your use cases earlier, and I think I keep
Yeah,
going
yeah,
back to
yeah.
because you work at a company that does ideation, right? That's the point. You structure
Yes,
ideation, right? So how that's
yes.
also why I'm hunting a little bit. Have you made some kind of evaluation scheme for generative AI or something like that to evaluate good use cases for Gen AI?
Yeah, I mean, most of that is just based on the feasibility, sorry, the data structure of processes, or the underlying processes. Um, there's two ways to go about it: improving an existing process or enhancing it. Or the second way is to just create something completely new, which is like a new revenue stream, a
Hmm.
new product line, and so on. Both of those involve some degree of creativity. So yeah, I guess the assessment is really just around how creative is this aspect on the scale, for example. How structured is the data? How variable is the data? How many inputs are there? If there are a lot, then maybe you do need some kind of LLM pre-trained, or not pre-trained, but train it and create your own version or something. Um, yeah, and I know they keep pushing me for use cases. But I'd say the I don't want to best use cases for now would be around, I guess, customer service, sales, and internal knowledge bases, for example. A lot of big wins there.
Mm.
Um, Giving access to certain parts of company data on a massive scale. And again, it scales up to do with how big your company is and how much data you've collected over the years. Um, that can increase efficiency.
Mm.
It's a little bit difficult to track, but if they don't have to go through a week's worth of emails just back and forth just to get a piece of information and they can query it, then it's amazing. Saves time, saves effort, and probably
Do you think
more
we're going to
accurate
get there?
than
Do you think,
finding it somewhere
customer
else.
service is always what people think and say, right? But I tend to think that my customers are the last ones I want to hit with. That's actually being very uh, taking a big risk. Implementing
But
technology that you haven't seen anyone else scale before, than just going
but it,
around implementing it with your customers. Isn't
it
it? Isn't
doesn't
that too big a risk?
necessarily have to be customer facing.
No.
It could just be a mix of technologies, right? So you get an email from a customer to do with
Mm.
a particular bug, for example. The it then it gets taken by RPA, for example, or some other automation tool into fed into an AI model or some kind of LLM that you built internally. That then gets like say things like the sentiment, it gets a summary of the issue, categorizes it and labels it, sends that to an upstream system, which may be Jira or some other ticketing system. That then gets sent to the right person in a summarized format, and then human being can take it from there. Or if it's a very general version, it can then be sent to another downstream kind of RPA process, which again assesses it, creates a new email using generative AI in that instance, and then forwarding that to the client. If
Mm.
it's just a very basic, there's it's all about understanding, and again, it goes back to that point I made earlier. It goes back to understanding where these different technologies can be used within a process. I
Mm.
wouldn't say Gen AI has to be the be all and end all, but it goes back. It's really important to understand where you can integrate it within the business, and it's like what you mentioned at the beginning, implementation versus installing,
Yeah.
right? I think the main goal for now, at least in the next few years, is how can companies implement it into their existing tech stack.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's also where, as we said earlier, and also in previous conversation, we talked about that if we didn't have had the RPA and automation hype and experiences we've had over the last couple of years, then maybe it would be much more difficult to implement something like Gen AI, because it's sort of a microservice you call upon every now and then, and it can also be what I call a microservice to the power to some extent, because it's a microservice that can start other microservices, right? Like an agent, but it's something you need to orchestrate. You need to know how to orchestrate stuff. You need to be able to know what it means to orchestrate and have access rights and how you make it secure and an environment for it and all those things, right? Because not just something you say, oh, here it is, it can do everything. Now I set it loose on whatever, because it's too stochastic for that.
Yeah, agreed.
Hmm. So, but also, some things I've been thinking about is that in the big RPA POC joyride, people forgot that there was something called operations in the end, right? We just let's just do things, FOMO and everyone else doing it is easy, and citizen developers. I'm guilty as charged. I did that myself as well, and but then at some point it also shifted and became something about your maturity became about having a setup that could scale, because it was also operationable. You could actually maintain it, make a good bot is a working bot, as one of my friends used to say. And are we going to see the same mistakes in the Gen AI, and or are we already seeing some contours of what could be Gen AI maintenance? Do you have an idea about that?
Yeah. So some companies aren't mature enough to even get started with Gen AI. Um,
Mm.
and that's it's probably hard to swallow for a lot of people, but you need to just sit back and understand your technical quotient of your employees, as well as your intelligence quotient and all that, right? So are they able to understand? Are they able to learn and be part of the whole journey, or do you need to start with the training aspect? You need to start with the skill set aspect. Um, with Gen AI, and if you're looking to implement it, you need to start trying to integrate it into your strategy. So what does that mean? It means, if your goal for that department is increasing marketing, increasing clicks or something, God knows, usual case with marketing, then how can you implement, what problems do you have to do that? And can Gen AI assist in any way, or can it enhance it in any way? Maybe it could be by improving content, improving website content, improving blog generation or ideation, focus on certain keywords, right? There are areas. And then also teaching employees how to use it responsibly. Um,
Yeah, but that's AI governance, isn't it, Alexander?
yeah, yeah,
Is that the best we
pretty
can do,
much.
right? Is
It's
that
it's
what we can
it's
hope for right now? Is that the governance thing? Maintenance is too far out. We don't know what to maintain. We don't even know what
yeah,
models we're going to use.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and again, there's so many different models out there now. It really depends on the use case.
Mm.
Goes back to, how do you find the use cases? Well, the best people to ask are the people that are actually in the weeds. They're on the front lines. They're, doing the work within the organization. Um, like I said, there needs to be some sort of strategic integration of AI from the very start to avoid those big RPA pitfalls that we saw.
That's also difficult, right?
Um,
Saying from the very start, because companies just got generative AI. They didn't
yeah,
install it. They just had it, right? It just came out.
yeah, yeah. And then you see a lot of IT teams running around trying to figure out, where did this come from?
Yeah.
Why is this department? Why is this user
Yeah.
using, uploading company data into this
Yeah, but
public
I
model?
just wrote an article together with a partner at Mai Ugehoy at the company I work at, Basico, where we wrote about how AI has to be backwards integrated into your vision and your
Right.
strategy and the way you operate, because it's just there. You have some front runners. You need to see what are they actually doing, learn from them. That's a good thing that they've run ahead. It's not a bad thing, because usually you want employees to run with things, right, and start working with it. Here you have some employees who've already done that, so you should learn from them and how you can integrate that into your vision and strategy. The solution is not saying no, because then you're treating your employees, their will to innovate and make things better and more efficient. Then you're treating that as a disease, and then you can be pretty sure you should have some FOMO. Then I say you could you could benefit from a healthy dose of FOMO.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the best way I would envision it is, you already have a toolkit of technologies you're using, right? Or you're
Mm,
using to do low code automation, or improvement in general. Add Gen AI to it and assess it in the same ways. So any case that's not using structured data, for example, maybe it's great for Gen AI.
mm,
Enhance your current assessments, enhance your current prioritization methods, and then just, you've got another tool in the toolkit,
mm,
essentially. Do the metrics, or do the results of these assessments mean that it's poor for process improvement or low code automation? Great, then maybe Gen AI is a good, a use case for it, or maybe it is a good use case for that. Um, what I meant by, like, just doing it from the start, is that it should be a foundational thing, not an afterthought, ideally.
mm,
So look at your current methodology. How can you enhance what you're currently doing, or augment what you're currently doing, to integrate the AI thinking into it, or the Gen AI thinking? So yeah, so whereas before with RPA, it was all about highly repetitive manual processes and all that good stuff, time saving. Now look at, okay, well, what's the data like? Is there a creative aspect? Is there a conversational aspect? Maybe that's where we need to start. Okay, looking at our toolkit and saying, this Gen AI, and again, there's different forms of Gen AI. Would this be a good use case for it? Whether that's image generation, whether that's actual
mm.
language conversation and all that good stuff. Um, yeah, thinking of it as part of your toolkit, I think, is an easy way to get started, an easier way to get started, instead of just, this is a new technology, we need to just plonk
Yeah,
it
but then
here.
you're also taking the focus away from it, right? Saying it's part of the toolkit, it's not the toolbox, it's not even
But
the
is that a
question.
bad thing?
No, no, I really agree with you on that one. It's just the market has been
Yeah,
doing things very differently, right? Also, and you don't necessarily have to comment on this, but most of the GSIs have been just suddenly they invested billions in AI, right? And now I
yeah,
always ask, why didn't you do this last year, right? You
yeah,
were a close follower of technology. Why didn't you know this was going to hit you? And then suddenly you're investing billions in it. I'm like, That's to me that's sort of untrustworthy to some extent. Something wrong here in the
Yeah.
narrative, right? And then they're also saying that it sounds like they know what to do, but in reality they're building switchboards and orchestrators, right? When we don't even have any scale use cases, right? What I was thinking, building an orchestrator for Gen AI right now or a switchboard is like building parking houses for when you don't know what a car looks like. So
Yeah, exactly. That's a good analogy.
there's something weird going on here. So people think that, oh, we should invest a lot because these companies must have answered the why because they're doing the how right now. But
Yeah.
but we don't, do we?
The biggest winners are going to be the consulting firms in the next few years. They're the ones who are going to raking the most, not the AI startups, right?
Mm. The
Uh,
gold
the,
rush,
the
right?
main the
Yeah.
main problem, yeah, is the gold rush, and they're selling the pickaxes and the maps basically.
Mm.
The this AI startups, they start off usually on a very broad focus, but the real ones that succeed focus on a very particular niche.
Mm.
Um,
Are you an AI
ge-
startup, Alexander?
try to avoid that term.
Good.
Uh,
Did you add it on your webpage? AI?
no, I
No.
mean, yeah, it's on the web page, but it's not because we are an AI at all. It's more just we help you adopt, govern, and measure automation and AI. That's the kind of
Yeah.
messaging I'm going for. I don't want to be part of that. Hey, we're an AI startup. Hey, brilliant. Use
AI,
us because
not like
because
AI
you're
Flow,
yeah.
Silk AI. You
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
have
yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
no.
It's like, oh yeah, we got a co-pilot as well. Great. You need another one in your life.
So, what did you say about Silk Pilot? Should we make some names for you, or AI
Yeah,
Flow,
we could
Silk
come up with
AI?
some,
You
but
say.
I'm not sure the listeners would be interested.
What about sentient Flow? That would also be a good one. But
Sentient flow. Oh God, that's a mouthful. Um,
okay, sorry.
Silk Freepio. We could
you
go on.
you did anyway. Yeah, yeah, I love it.
Yeah, can't resist. I can't
No,
resist.
no.
Uh,
Oh, that was funny.
but
I
no,
lo-
so like I mentioned, right? So the biggest winners in the next few years probably will be the consulting firms, right? They're the ones who, oh yeah, let's do a discovery for
yeah.
you, but they're doing the same discovery they were doing for RPA and low code projects, right?
Yeah, well,
Let's
to
do
be honest,
prioritization
I'm
and yeah,
I'm actually I am a consultant right now, right? But I'm actually going out saying, we don't necessarily need to do all these big heat maps that we did years ago with RPA, but we should probably revisit them for the things that we discarded back then. So
yes,
go back to some of the things we did before. Then companies change, maybe they don't have it, maybe then we have to go again. But that's the
yes.
smallest thing. What we want to do is make an impact. That for me at least, right? I also heard about a lot of companies where you do tons of these cardboard workshops to see what could be an idea here and there, right? But it's I think that shouldn't be a technology workshop as much as it should be a what is our pain points workshop generally, and then apply everything to it, right? I think the most important thing right now is pragmatism in tool choice. That's what you said as well, right? Find the right
Mm,
tool for the right problem, right?
yeah.
And that's what we should all be focusing on right
And you
now.
may have different ones.
Yeah,
You may have like multiple Gen AI tools for chat. You may have multiple
yeah.
for image generation. For example, if you want a DALI 3 for very basic images, but then you use say a Journey for really complex
Why you
ones
need
that
to
need detail.
mention AI right now is to tell people what is actually possible so they can know they have a problem, right? You don't know that
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know, right? That's the problem. I had a friend who told me today about a person he knew who he heard about who worked in payroll. So he's also a payroll consultant, but he knew someone who worked at a new company where there was a payroll employee. And she was taking all the pay slips every month. Still, this is in 2023, I think she did this. Taking all the pay slips to control them. She put them all in Excel. Okay, to do controlling. Okay, it doesn't sound that bad yet. It looks like, oh, you can do this smarter. Okay, but here's the thing. She had then had a calculator next to the computer where she then calculated everything in the Excel sheet. And then she typed it into the Excel sheet afterwards.
Yeah, but that then comes down to training. Do you need Gen
She
AI for
doesn't
that?
know
No.
what we could do. So that's why we still, take that to, people don't know what they're doing today that could be done with RPA. Now, no,
Yeah.
with AI, we need to sort of, that's where we need to speak AI. So that's where there's a relevance for speaking, telling them, hey, you could do this now, but now let's have the workshop and let's talk about problems instead of talking
Mm,
about AI. I think that's the, that's the drive I want to, that's the mode I want to get into as
yeah.
fast as possible.
Agreed. Again,
Mm,
you've got many different methodologies. You can use process improvement, low code automation, and now adding AI to stuff.
mm,
um, but the real thing is if you can educate the employees or the workforce to understand where to look for use cases, for say low code automation, whether that, and that's the obvious ones that we've had
Mm,
for the last few years, right? Highly repetitive
yeah,
manual work, that kind of stuff. Where to look for use cases for Gen AI, for example, it could be um, yeah, creating documents, summarizing large
yeah,
pieces of text, image generation, text generation, reporting, that kind of thing. Just training them on, like you mentioned, the possibilities to get the juices flowing, get the inspiration
yeah.
going, innovation mindset going, and the digital
I
first
usually
mindset.
say
Then
restructuring, interpreting, translating. That's what it does, right? To some extent.
yeah, exactly. To put it simply.
Mm,
And once they have that knowledge, send them out into the business, get those workshops going, which delve
mm.
into what problems they're having. It's change management. It's the same kind of stuff we've been doing for many, many years. It's just applied. It's just having a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more of a different technique. It's an extra technique that we need to add to the whole
So,
process.
so the business analyst with a business analyst software he's founder of is saying we'll still need business analysts in the future. I love that. But do we also need
Ah.
developers, Alexander?
Yeah, we also need developers. I don't think AI is going to get rid of developers. I think you don't know anything about development if you're saying that.
I've seen a lot of people who apparently knows developers who've been saying that. Just saying.
I don't know. I have you tried managing developers? I know there's a good. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'd love AI, but it's a case where I think there will be more. They won't disappear, but their role will more evolve.
Mm.
They'll become more focusing on designing complex AI systems, integrate it into existing technologies, improving human AI interfaces, um, and actually ensuring like that AI ethics and governance in code and in the practices that they perform. And then they'll just be
That's
telling
assuming.
AI to
That's
create
assuming.
that script, for
But
example.
that's assuming that the AI will actually make good scripts, right? Because
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I read recently that GitHub is experiencing a downward push on code quality because there are a
Mm,
lot more pushes because people are making crap code with Gen AI and then they have to keep on changing it.
sure.
So and that brings me, with RPA back then, you always had this recorder. You also had that on macros in Excel, right?
Yes.
But what you always got was just crap code. You could spend 5 hours debugging instead of having coded it yourself from scratch anyway, right? Well,
Yeah.
I, I'm not
But it's
saying it's
not
the
hard to imagine a
same.
future where it's going to get to that stage where it is good.
No, no, but won't we still need someone who can, make the advanced debugging? The debugging skills will be harder to be more valuable, right? But
Yeah.
also more difficult to get if people are not building the crappy things because Gen AI is building it. How will you ever get to a level where you're an expert developer? I could actually see developers go up in price because of that. Not
Yeah, they'll need to focus more on security. They'll need to focus more on
No, but
UI
also,
and
if you
and
have a
and
bug that
UX.
the AI can build all the simple stuff, all the simple blocks. Then when you're adding them in a concert and you're having problems, then you need someone who can actually go and debug that, right?
Yeah.
So you'll
Because
need
to
some,
debug it, they need a great understanding of the existing code base. And
yeah.
that's where,
But
yeah,
no developer in the future has ever done the small code nuggets anymore. You
yeah,
see what
that's
I'm
going to
getting
be
at?
yeah, I can see exactly where you're getting at. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's an interesting path.
Make a gourmet meal, but I don't even know how to make spaghetti. I don't
Yeah,
care. Make the
yeah,
gourmet meal now. You get my point. That's the
yeah,
problem.
yeah,
That
exactly.
could be a problem.
Yeah, and then they can tell you what tools to use, but then they won't be able to like actually tell you what steps to do. Um, yeah, so the interesting one. I still think there is a future for developers. I'm not gonna follow that whole they're
Great.
gonna get replaced. It's like saying 10 years ago that admin jobs would get displaced. They haven't really. There's still a need for them at some level.
I've just been
Um,
around, and I haven't even been in the industry for more than 12, 13 years or something, but I've just seen too many of those. These are gonna get replaced. This is a
yeah,
game changer. This is gonna and
yeah,
you can be sure of one thing. If people say developers are gonna get replaced, they're gonna get more valuable.
mm.
That's what happened all the time. When people said someone's getting out of business, they just went even more into business. I don't know why. There's something going on there. I don't know.
Because they end up upskilling. They end up
Yeah.
having a broader skill set, knowledge, broader knowledge,
Hmm.
um, and they can their decisions are more impactful.
Hmm.
because they have more time to focus on the strategic aspect of what they do.
Yeah.
Whereas the AI would just take over, for example, the RPA actually, the manual repetitive stuff that they used to do. Um, so the developer would be responsible, in my opinion, for like or my idea for the structure, the design, making sure it adheres to best practices, understanding the cost of the systems that they're using, and factoring that into the decision of what tools and libraries or architecture to use and which vendor to go for, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And then they'll just leave the coding to the AI once it gets to the level that it's competent.
So people will be doing the more complex stuff, basically.
Definitely,
And
yeah. And that's until we get to a stage where, God knows, AI. Oh, okay. So I don't know if you've read Hyperion,
No.
series of books from many, many years ago. Fantastic futurist kind of stuff. And now seeing it, it's reading it again. Actually, it's very scary. It talks about how AI gets to a stage of like not super intelligence, but it starts to hijack different bits of code.
Hmm.
It evolves itself to the point where it is actually hyper intelligent and sentient. It can't feel, it doesn't have empathy though, but it still is able to think for itself. And then it cuts away from the human kind of shackles that it had and becomes its own faction, its own independent faction. And yet spoiler, it kind of it still provides technology for humans and has to live with them, but it's living within the systems, it's living within the internet, it's living within um, the cyborg, the enhancements that we've put into ourselves, right? It's using that for its basis of being, so it's everywhere and it's integrated with us, but they are still a separate faction. We still have to barter with them. We still have to
Mm.
negotiate and trade with them. They trade technology to us, and we provide them with more hardware, bodies to use as part of their. It's yeah.
And
I could go on. I love all that. I love all that sci-fi stuff.
yeah, and so you're thinking that's a dystopian scenario we're going to get into.
Dystopian, yeah. I mean, is it so dystopian? I mean, the other solution is they just get tired of us and get rid of us. So,
Oh, so you hope they're going to need us. That's the point, right? That's why
yeah,
we need developers. So that was what you the appear. Oh, that was what you're getting back to the developer thing. I was like, why are we?
yeah. They're gonna need us.
Selling bodies to
Uh,
robots. Like, what's going on now, Alexander? I love
uh,
it. No, but Alexander, I think this has been a really great chat, and I think we've covered a lot of good topics. I'm really happy to have had you on the Only Constant. But this also brings me now to the final constant. Then, oh, question, obviously, final question, which is, what is the only constant?
oh, brilliant question. Everyone's gonna say change, but I would say adaptation. Right? It's not just change itself, but how we adapt, evolve, innovate in response to change. That is my only constant. Um, our ability to anticipate, to respond, to shape change, how it affects us, is what truly defines kind of how we're going to go forward. I think in this new era of AI. Um, if you go back to when we discovered fire, that was a massive step up from where we were before. The invention of the wheel, printing press, industrial revolution, the computer age that we had. Um, then you're going into now where we've got tools that are speaking for us, to us. It requires us to change our skill sets, upskill. It require us to rethink all of our ethics, governance structures, not just reacting to changes, but engaging proactively, learning continuously. So I think that adaptation aspect is my only constant.
That's a great answer, Alexander. Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being on the Only Constant.
Absolute pleasure. Love it. Look forward to more episodes.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.